3 for vendors. Hopefully you've participated in either session number 1, session number 2, which addressed getting registered in BidBuy and setting up sellers and BidBuy. And so today we're starting to dive a little deeper, and we'll be talking about how you go about obtaining and responding to a bid in BidBuy. So I think it's going to be a very informative session. And as usual, our instructor this morning is Dave Luttrell. Dave is an acting SPO, State Purchasing Officer with the state of Illinois. He's also a procurement specialist and takes care of our small business program. So he has a lot of experience in working with vendors who do business with the state, assisting vendors, and is a great presenter to work with you directly. So my name is Lori Lawton, and I am a part of the BidBuy team. I'm also a state purchasing officer and very involved in the training program. So if you have any questions, comments, or concerns about training, I am the person to send those to. A few housekeeping items. If you've been with us before, you know that there is a question and answer interface within our GoToWebinar system. And so that is how we'd like you to submit any questions that you have. As we're going through the session this morning, if the question is really relevant to what we're talking about, we may stop our session and answer your questions right then. However, if there's something really that we want to leave to the end, we may answer your question at the end. But don't let that stop you. As soon as you have a question, please do submit it to us, and we monitor those throughout the whole program. So having said all of that, the more questions, the better, and I'm going to turn this over to Dave Luttrell.
All right, thanks, Lori. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Like Lori said, today we're going to be talking about how you obtain and respond to bids. So some of our objectives this morning, we're going to talk a little bit about why BidBuy, just a reminder on why the state is going with this e-procurement system. We're going to talk about a couple of the procurement types, invitation for bid, RFP, small purchase, and some other. We're going to talk about the difference between a formal and informal quote within the BidBuy system. We'll talk about how you obtain a solicitation and how you will acknowledge receipt of a bid within the system in order to begin the process of responding. So we'll talk about actually how we get into the system. We're going to walk you all the way through. We'll talk about some of the steps in terms of responding to a bid, and then I'll walk through the process with you so you can see how it's done. We're going to talk about the difference between paper and electronic submittal. Just a reminder that you are not required to submit your response electronically, but you certainly can. That's one of the benefits of this system is keeping paper to a minimum. We'll talk about how you attach documents, revising your quotes, withdrawing your quotes, how you can do multiple quotes, and like I said, the paper response is there. We'll talk about those instances where subcontractors are on your quotes and how you will utilize the BEP functionality there. We'll show you how you enter pricing, accepting the terms and conditions, and then at the end we'll show you where you can access all your vendor resources. Some of those, if you've been on the previous sessions, we have training that is available out there. The BidBuy team here has done a great job. We have videos, we have resources that you can always go and look. So just a refresher on why the state of Illinois is going to the e-procurement system BidBuy. It's going to simplify the bid and quote process by allowing electronic submittals, thereby reducing all the paper documentation, all the records from the state side and your side as well. So it's going to centralize all the state procurement communications into one single location, and it's going to allow you to easily go review all your open bids, submit your bids and quotes, and receive awards all from one central location. And it's also going to allow you to go out and review all your procurement history and any of your procurement history with the state. A little bit of general overview in terms of some of the terms that are going to be changing. A lot of you are very well versed in the Illinois Procurement Bulletin and some of the terms that were used there. So we have a few terms that are going to be new, and before you know it, you'll be picking it up and speaking BidBuy. So when we talk about solicitations and notices, in BidBuy, they're called bids. IPB registered users are bidders. Addendums will be called amendments. Bids and offers are called quotes. Award information will be the bid tab. Contracts are called purchase orders or POs, and amendments will be now called change orders. So you'll have access to this, so you don't need to memorize it right now. You'll always be able to come back and take a look at these terms. And like I said, you'll be speaking BidBuy in no time. So first off, let's just jump into informal quotes. So the informal quote process is going to be very similar. Okay. It looks like, have you started the webinar already? Messages saying, please stay on the line because the webinar will start shortly, but it looks like you're already running slides. Yes, we have already.
Let's open it up and troubleshoot that.
Yeah, let's figure this out. Please hold, everyone. Sorry about that.
The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Okay, sorry for any inconvenience. We will go ahead and start our session now. My name is Lori Lawton, and I'm a state purchasing officer, also a member of the BidBuy team. And the session that we're going to be going through this morning is session number 3, obtaining and responding to bids. Hopefully you joined us for one of our previous sessions, either session number 1 or session number 2. If you haven't joined us for those sessions, we'll be rerunning those. So stay tuned for any future updates and notices about those sessions. Those sessions covered how to register in BidBuy, how to set up your BidBuy account as a vendor with a seller administrator at your organization, also how to then establish sellers from your organization within your account. But today we're going to be going over and getting into greater detail in obtaining and responding to bids. So I think this session is going to be very interesting this morning and very informative. So we'll go through in great detail. Just a little bit on the housekeeping side. The GoToWebinar system that we use offers the ability to go in and submit your questions by typing them in. Please do feel free to submit questions at any time. We will stop if the questions that come in are relevant to what we're talking about. If you send us a question, though, that's on a different topic, we may hold that until the end. But do please feel free to send questions early and often, and as many questions as you would like, because that really makes these sessions much more informative for you. Our presenter this morning is Dave Luttrell. Dave Luttrell is an acting state purchasing officer. He is also a procurement specialist who manages the small business program with the state of Illinois. So he works frequently with assisting vendors in, doing business, and is very knowledgeable in terms of both the BidBuy system and the Illinois Procurement Code and all of the things that we need to be aware of as we're going through and establishing contracts. So having said that, I am going to turn it over to Dave, and he can go ahead and get started.
All right, thank you, Lori. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for being here. Like Lori said, today we're going to be talking about the session 3, which is obtaining and responding to bids. So our objectives today, we're going to do a quick refresher on why the state of Illinois is going to this BidBuy e-procurement system. We're going to talk about a couple of the procurement types, IFBs, RFPs, small purchase, and others. We'll talk about the difference between formal and informal quotes. We'll show you how you're obtaining a solicitation from the state, how you will acknowledge a receipt of a bid, and we'll get into responding. We'll get into responding to a bid. We'll walk you through the steps. I'll go out to the system and actually walk through how we respond to an informal quote as well as a formal quote, so you can see that happen today. We'll talk about the difference between the paper and electronic submittal. Just a reminder that the BidBuy, one of their great functionality is that you can allow electronic submittals, but you are not required. So you still could add your paper responses, although the electronic ones, it's going to help a lot with the system and a little bit more efficient for everybody. We'll attach documents. We'll talk about revising quotes, withdrawing quotes, how you can have multiple quotes, as well as the paper responses. We'll get into some of the subcontracting functionality on BidBuy on the quotes that has utilizing the BEP, and how you can go out and search for a vendor within the system and add as a subcontractor if applicable. We'll show you how you enter pricing, how you accept the term and conditions, and then we'll show you how you can access some vendor resources. How the slides today will be posted. The BidBuy team has done a great job of providing plenty of training materials for you so everyone can feel comfortable with the system, and we'll show you how to access those a little bit later. So a quick refresher on why BidBuy. So it's going to simplify the bid quote process by allowing electronic submittals, thereby reducing all the paper documentation and records. And that's going to be helpful from the state side as well as for the vendors. It's going to centralize state procurement communications all in one single location, and it's going to allow you to easily review any of your open bids, submit bids and quotes, as well as receive awards from one central location. And it'll allow you to review all your company's procurement history. So a little bit of a general overview. We touched on this in a couple of the previous sessions, but it's important enough. We wanted to touch on it again. Some of the terms that will be changing within the new system. Many of you are very well versed in the Illinois Procurement Bulletin and that previous process. So some of the terms are going to change. You'll have access to this, so we're not expecting you to memorize this all today, but it will be helpful as you start to speak the new BidBuy language. So currently solicitations and notice in BidBuy, they're going to be called bids. IPB registered users will be called bidders. Addendums will be called amendments. Bids and offers will be called quotes. Award information, it will be the bid tab. Contracts will be called purchase orders or POs in BidBuy, and amendments are called change orders. So let's get into informal quotes versus the formal quotes. So your informal quote, the current process now, how you would receive an email for a request for a quote. This is mostly used for small purchase processes, where it's going to be an informal thing where you're going to get an email and there, the state is asking for a quote for a small purchase. So you'll receive, here's a screenshot of a email that you would receive, a notification regarding the availability of an informal quote opportunity. After receiving the quote, you're going to log into BidBuy and you're going to put in your informal quote request. So instead of just shooting back an email like you would now, you'll go into the system. You're going to select quotes, informal quotes. You'll click create a quote, and then you're going to go through and complete all the tabs with all the required information. Your general tab, the items, the address, terms and conditions. You would need to add any attachments that might be required. And then on the summary tab, you'll click submit quote. And like I said, we'll go through that and I'll show you exactly how we go out to the system to respond to informal quote. And once you submit, shortly thereafter, you're going to receive an email confirmation that confirms that your quote has been submitted. And like I said here, if you did not submit it electronically, then the state entered the quote in BidBuy on your behalf. So that would have been a paper. This won't be as it won't happen as often with the informal quote because the informal quote is such a quick turnaround time. So the state most likely won't be entering the quotes on your behalf. But you would receive this on a formal quote if you had submitted a paper submittal. Okay, so why don't we go out to the system and walk through the informal quote process really quickly. So I will log in here as my vendor. So this will look familiar to you. Up here you see where I'm in the seller role. And so I will go to bids. There's two ways to access this. You can go to bids here or bids down here. I see all my bids. Here's an open bid. This is 2470. I'm gonna go ahead and open that up. Now, two ways I can even click open here, or I can go straight to create quote. So I'm gonna create quote, and here's where you'll acknowledge receipt of the bids. So once you click acknowledging this, you'll receive everything that is, you know, all the corresponding communication after this. So I'm gonna go ahead and click yes.
Dave, I just wanted to add a quick comment there, which I think is very timely. So in terms of the seller role and the seller administrator, just wanted to remind everyone, and we've talked about this before, the email address that receives the notice of solicitation is the email address that is established on your vendor account. So there is one email address the very first time someone at your company goes out and sets up your account, they will enter an email address for your company. That is the address that will receive those initial emails and the initial notice of the solicitation opportunity. However, it's not just that single email account that can come out here and begin the process of responding to a request for an informal quote or submitting a response to a request on an IFB RFP. Anyone within your account that has a seller account established can go out and do this process. And so the reason I wanted to bring all of that up now is that, as Dave was saying, when you click and acknowledge that you have received it, your email as the seller will then be added to this particular bid. So should there be an amendment, any notices, all of that then would not only go to that initial email address on the vendor account, it will also go to the person who acknowledges, to anyone who acknowledges the particular bid.
Great. Thank you, Lori. So I went to quotes, informal quotes. Here's our informal quote. And now we're going to go through and oh, you know what? I think I had already added that informal quote. So over here on the right-hand side, you would see create new. And there's some quotes that are working.
Can you sign in, Dave, as a different vendor?
Sure. Yeah.
Yeah, go out and Dave's going to go out. In this particular case, he had already gone in as he was preparing for this session, and he had submitted a quote, which is why when he logged in, what he saw displayed was the ability to go in and view the quote that he had already submitted. And that would have given him the opportunity, if after submitting the quote he wanted to make any changes, he could have gone in and updated the quote he had submitted.
There we go. Okay. So over here we see, so we clicked on, just as a reminder, get back to quotes. I clicked on informal quotes. Here's the informal quote. I'm going to click create. And here's my informal quote. Now I'm going to go in and I'm just going to add my quote here. I'm going to say they're $1.50 a piece. Over here, you see the unit of measure, which is UOM, will be each. There is an opportunity here to click no bid. If you click no bid, that will show up that you were interested in it, but you put it in as no bid. So we're going to go back and put we'll say $1. So $1 each. At that point, that's as easy as it gets. So you have added, you've created that quote. And you could always go back and look at your informal quotes, your working quotes, your submitted quotes. You can see where that was submitted. You can see some of the general information here. You can always go back and look at it. So I'm going back to my quote that I just added. You can see all the other information here. I could go back in and view and update it. I can manage attachments. If there's anything particularly that I needed to add, I could click Manage Attachments. I can go in and add a file. You could go and choose your file. You could add anything that you needed, edit any required attachments there. And save and exit.
And Dave, can you do the view update and go in and just do a change in price?
Sure. So I'm going here. For instance, I put $1. I am rethinking this, and I go, no, you know what? I need to do $1.50 each. So I'm going to go in. I can click Save and Continue just to double check all my information here. There's going to be 10,000 of them, $1.50. So my overall quote, for my informal quote, is going to be $15,000.
And as you can see, it automatically does those calculations. So it automatically extends it out for you.
Mm-hmm.
And it looks like we have a question.
Do the informal quotes apply to service companies or just suppliers? So the informal quotes, like I said, this will be more of a process for small purchases. So if you have been used to receiving an email or a request for quote, this is going to be the process for that. So it applies to everything. So to answer your question, it will apply to service companies as well as suppliers. Where do we put our company information on this quote? So that will be a part of the when you are registering. So that information will already be there. If I go back out and show you here, you're going to see the buyer, the ship to, but all the information from your company is already built into your seller role that will have been done when your seller administrator had set up all your addresses and all your company information. If we're a service company, how does unit quantity apply to us? What should we be filling in that field? The unit quantity, that will already be filled in because that will be, the request for quote in this instance is the state is saying we need 10,000 syringes, 10 milliliter plastic syringes. So that'll be something that'll be specific and already filled out. So you as the vendor wouldn't be dealing with the quantity because that's going to be something that the state is filling in for their need.
Right, and I think just to help clarify that a little bit, so in terms of the units of measure on this particular example show as each, but the unit of measure for a service company could in fact be an hourly rate. So the unit of measure might be the unit cost per hour, but your line item itself will be established by the state in a way that you as your service company will be able to go in and respond, listing an hourly rate or an overall price. But again, as Dave was saying, on this informal quote process, this is usually used for small purchases, and we have a different process that we're going to share with you this morning. If we were looking for a very large quote, it's a lot more detailed, and the information that you would provide would look a little differently. But I think basically the main difference here is going to be what your unit of measure would be for a service.
Okay. We have another one here. How do we know you received the bid? You will receive an email. So if we go back to here, you'll receive this confirmation email that it's been received by the state, or it was submitted and it was received by the state. So that would be your confirmation there. So The informal quote process is pretty easy. It is very similar to what you would have received with the RFQ document in the past. You're just going to really go out and put in your pricing information and save it, and there it is. So it's pretty simple, it's pretty quick, and it's pretty efficient as well. So now we're going to move on to, I think we have another question. So once it is completed, it is automatically submitted. Yes, so in the informal quote process, yes, correct. We have another question. Good morning, I understand everything you just did. My issue is I own a black car service, and I did several searches for contracts with the 071 and 80 codes. I did not see any contracts to bid on. My question is, am I searching correctly, and does the state use black car services? If you are registered using those NIGP codes, if the state does procure that, does purchase that, then you would be you would receive the same notification email. Maybe just at this point, that's not something that is currently being procured. That's my only response at that point. I mean, if you're registered, you would receive notification, and you can always go out and search. But at this point, there may just not be something out there right now.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that's, a really good question, as all these questions this morning have been really, really helpful questions. But the state of Illinois is in the process of transitioning over to BidBuy. So we have many agencies that are going completely live in the BidBuy system right now. But during this transition period, over the next 3 to 6 months, you'll want to remain registered and utilize both the Illinois Procurement Bulletin as it exists right now, the one that you're familiar with, as well as the new BidBuy system. So you're going to want to be registered in both places, and then should there be a quote or a solicitation posted in either of those locations, a bid, you'll get a notice. So I don't know what the state demand is for black car services specifically, but as long as you are registered in the IPB or registered in BidBuy, you will get any notification that's posted. And we've covered this before, but just a reminder that this is the procurement system for the CPO for general services and central management services, but it is not the state's procurement system for higher education, for IDOT, for CDB construction. So it's just the general service type procurement, but black cars would definitely fall in the category of general services.
We have another question. We'd submitted a bid in paper. However, now that I'm getting orders from this particular bid, my item numbers are not showing up on the order. I have to keep referring back to my paper bid to see what they are ordering. Will our item numbers that we bid appear on future orders?
That's a really good question. When we put a solicitation out, we're putting it out for any vendor to respond to. So let's say number 2 pencils, for example, and let's say for you, that is item number 7. So what you're going to see when you receive our orders is that, we are sending you an order for 1,000 number 2 pencils. It does not necessarily reflect your specific vendor number. But hopefully the good news is by going into BidBuy, you'll be able to go ahead and look at your attachments and any information that you submitted and be able to do that. But I'll make a note of this particular question and see if there's anything that we can do in the future that might better correlate that. I think I do have some ideas around that, and we can share that with you maybe a little later this morning.
Another question, what happens if you were awarded the bid? What happens if you do not? Would you receive notification either way? So that is, yes, you will receive notification if you were awarded the bid. You'll receive that purchase order notification. Now that's going to be something that we're going to talk about in the next training session, session 4, because we don't want to take up too much of your time. Today is really going to be focused on how you respond. So we'll kind of circle back and go through that process on what would happen if you receive notification, but you will definitely receive notifications. Okay, so that was our informal quote. let's go take a look at our formal quote. And now here's a screenshot of, if you view from just the login page, if you haven't logged in yet, you're going to receive this. So you can go out to click on Open Bids, and I'll show you that in just a moment. The Open Bids on the BidBuy homepage is essentially the same thing as the Illinois Procurement Bulletin. You don't have to be logged in. You can see all the open bids that are out there currently. And so this is something that you would see. So if you, in order to acknowledge receipt, you have to be signed in. And so I'll go ahead and show you that, and then we'll get started on the formal quote process. So I'm going to go out here. Go ahead and log out. So here's our home page. Of course, this is the training environment. That's why you're seeing train. If you go down to Open Bids. So here's everything that would be out there for, this is in the training environment, of course, but this would be essentially the same thing as the Illinois Procurement Bulletin right now, where you go out and you just see all the open bids that we have available. I click on that. There we see that acknowledging receipt. If you want to receive notifications regarding the solicitation, you must log into BidBuy using your username and password. Or you can actually just go out and just see it and not be, you don't have to be logged in to see it, but you would have to be logged in order to acknowledge it and to proceed with your quote. So there's all that to say, you don't need to be logged in order to go out and see any of the open solicitations that are there. So what I'm going to do is, now we're going to go back to the formal process, and we'll come back to this bid in just a moment. So we'll walk through a couple of the steps, then we'll go out and show you. So you're going to select Create Quote on your formal quotes. You can click Yes to acknowledge the receipt of this bid. And like I said, once again, from that point, you're clicking Acknowledge in order to receive further notifications and communication regarding this bid. You're going to go in, you'll complete all the tabs with all your required information, the General tab, the Items tab, the questions, if they're questions from the state, Subcontracting tab, if applicable, accepting the terms and conditions. You'll add any of the attachments there concerning, like Forms A, Forms B, any of your BEP utilization plan, any of the contracting documentation, all will be within the Attachments tab. And then once you get to the Summary tab, you're going to click Submit Quote, and then you'll receive this confirmation email. Same thing as the informal quotes, you'll receive this email confirmation that says, yes, the state has been submitted and the state has received it. Okay, so why don't we go out and I'll walk through that process so you can see that. Here's our open bids. I can go back to exit. I want to get to that front page, so I need to log in if I'm going to in order to acknowledge it. Okay, so we're back to our familiar screen. We're going to go to bids. Here you see all the different types of bids. Here's the open bids that I'm going to bid on here is this right here. I can click Create Quote or open the bid. I'm going to click Create Quote. Now we're going to continue all the way through the tabs here. So we're going to start from the left to right. Just as a reminder, all the required information is going to have an asterisk right next to it. So that's very helpful. And if you save and continue and move on, and you had not filled in something that is required, it will stop you and it will give you a warning. Yes. Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was one that I had that for.
Maybe it's on the summary. Yep, they're there.
They're there. Okay. Sorry, we just wanted to make sure that we had these attachments that were here to be able to show you. So we're going to create the quote, and now we're back in here. So the only required one on the general here is what was already there. We highly encourage you just to not mess with that at all, because that is already been, description has already been put by the state. Save and continue. Now you can see where we have these validation errors. So all this is going to be, okay.
So from that initial solicitation that we saw before, one of the first things that you're going to want to do before you respond to your quote and start submitting your formal response is to absolutely look at your IFB template and your Forms A and your Forms B so that you have a thorough understanding of what's actually being solicited. This is more of your formal solicitation. So looking and obtaining your attachments and your Forms A and your Forms B and reading those through in their entirety before you begin your response so that you have a thorough understanding and are sure that you can meet the terms of what the state is interested in.
Thank you, Lori. So here's an example of the IFB. Of course, all this information would be filled in. This is just the template. So this all should look all familiar to you, has all of the information, all the solicitation document has all the specifics that you would need to fill out. So that should all look familiar to you guys. So like Lori said, first of all, you'll go out, read it all, be sure that you want to create a quote for this particular IFB and submit a formal quote. Looks like we have a question here. When you sign for acknowledging receipt, which email will receive notifications? Is it only the one who acknowledges or all sellers and administrators? So both. So the seller administrator would receive an email as well as the seller.
Right. So the only way that once you acknowledge it, start receiving those is if you are the seller who acknowledged it. But all of the notices will continue to go to that main vendor email, and then anyone who acknowledges and is added to the bid holder list will get all the future notices and communications.
Okay. So here, like I said, we've looked at the IFB template. We say, yes, we definitely want to create a quote for guard and security services, and we're going to create a quote. We will save and continue here, and we're just going to be moving right along. So from general, now we're going to move on to our items tab, and here are where our errors will be. It's telling us that we haven't hit the terms and conditions. There's a question that's mandatory here and hasn't been answered, and so it'll help you walk you through. So our items, this is where we'll put in our cost. You see the quantity, unit of measure, unit costs. We're going to say this will be, I'm just shooting it there, $125,000.
Right, and so to the person who asked earlier, how would services work differently? How does entering cost, how does that differ when you're a service? And again, in this particular case, if the solicitation said, we're looking for a single price to provide security guard services at a specific facility for 1 year, 1 guard, and it is only looking for one particular price, that might be one way that you would see prices listed on a formal quote for you to go and input your pricing. The other thing, though, that you might see, especially, not especially, but I think as it relates to either services or commodities, is you might see a number of line items here and be asked to quote an hourly rate. So, a line item for security guard services listed to provide an hourly rate, it would show you a unit of measure as hourly, and you would list that full hourly rate that you would be charging the state. You might also then see another line item that might be the security guard services manager asking you for a different hourly rate for the manager, that kind of thing. So that's what you can expect to see. This is a very simple one for our demonstration today, but this is how you'll see a variety of different line items that you'll be providing pricing for.
Okay, thanks. And as you may see over here on the right, when this was set at 0, it's at no bid. So it defaults at no bid until you put in your price. So that's something that is very important to be aware of. And also you want to make sure that there is a no charge as well. So that's going to be an option within the system. So you want to be very well aware of these. You can tell once I click no charge, the unit cost went back to 0 here.
And you may be wondering, why would I have a no charge button? Some examples of something that might be added as a line item is, let's say, an accessory. So we are looking for, let's say, those 1,000 pencils, and then we also want pencil holders. And it may very well be that in your pricing structure, you charge for the pencils, and the pencils are 10 cents a piece. But you also provide the pencil holder, but that's part of the package, and you provide that at no additional charge. So that is really the purpose of the no charge. If you're adding and responding to a line item out on a formal quote, and it's something that you're providing as part of your quote, but that you're offering to the state, and you will not be charging the state for that particular item. So no bid means you're just letting us know you're not bidding on a certain line item, or you're not bidding at all. No charge will indicate that you're going to provide that item, but you're not going to charge the state for it. So very important to understand the difference between no bid and no charge. But in the case of Dave, if you tab over, if you hit your tab button, you'll see once he's tapped through and entered that pricing, it's created the extended amount, and all of that no bid, no charge goes away.
Yep. Another note here is about the discount pricing. So you can add the discount on some of the IFBs. There may be a list price, and there's a discount off MSRP. So that's how this functionality is there. Let's say it's $125,000 is the list. It probably wouldn't be in this situation, but in some of the other commodities, there may be a discount price off MSRP. So it's, I don't know, say 5% off. It automatically does the math for you, and here's that. There's a sub-tab within the items here. I just wanted to make I'm going to go ahead and save and continue that. Within the notes, so you can add notes on particular quotes, and just want to make a note that only the authorized users who have access to this profile can view the information. This is not viewable by the state. So you can make notes for different quotes, and that's just a nice little functionality in the system for you. Let's see, we have a question here. Is there an electronic signature? No, there is no electronic signature functionality within the system. We'll get into how you respond with the purchase order in another training session, and how we'll walk through that process. Can you explain the no bid? I think we just did that a little bit. Sorry, I'm a couple minutes behind here on a couple of these questions. Do you have to use the discount percentage, or can that be included in the unit price? The discount percentage does not need to be used. That is just it's an optional functionality, because sometimes that is what the state is looking for. For instance, we have software that we have resellers, for instance, where the list price is the same, but it's all done through resellers, and it is used as the discount. The discount percentage is what being used there. So you certainly don't have to. Most of the time, I would venture to say you won't, because we're asking for a quote, and we would go back and say, no, there's no discount. It is just simply, here's my quote. Oh, 0. There we go. You can see how that went back to $125,000, and we're saving and continue. So we'll go ahead and just move along through our tabs here. Again, always we're going top to bottom, left to right. Questions. So here, this is where the state may include a question and it may be required. In this point, it's saying it is mandatory and it hasn't been answered yet. For this one, I just put in, did you include all required attachments? I'll say yes. There may be something particular specific that the state needs, and that answer needs to be required there. So that's just to show you that functionality.
Some other examples of types of questions the state may put on a formal quote. It may be a question about, do you hold a certain certification? And the response may be to list a certification number or a license number. Are you a licensed plumber? And have that information answered here in our state-provided questions. So you can see any kind of question on there, and it will show you whether or not it's required. If it is a required question, it is essential, and you must provide a response. So that is the information about the question tab.
Okay, and just to add on to that, too, the responses, they're not all yes, no. From the state side, the agency will put in different options there, depending on what type of question that is. So it's not just going to be yes, no. Okay, so that takes care of our questions. We're moving to our subcontractors. In this instance, I went ahead and put that there would be a BEP goal here, and so I want to show you how you would go through that process. Certainly on many of these there wouldn't be, but here's an instance where there is. It looks like the goal type is BEP. What you would do is you're going to go on and look up and add your vendors. And here is where you can go in, you can search BEP certified, and you can go in here and see which specific goal it is. If it's MBE, service disabled, veteran-owned small business, woman-owned, and you can go through and pick the one that is specific to that BEP goal, and you will go ahead and search. Now within the training environment, I believe there aren't any set up at this point, but you would see these. So I'm just going to go ahead and just add, search for one. Now it would just look like this. If you had specific BEP vendors that you are subcontracting with, you would see all these here. I went ahead, since there wasn't one, just for to show our purposes here, I'll just go and pick one here. I'm going to subcontract there. I'm going to click Save and Exit. Now it shows this vendor here.
Yeah, and so some additional guidance around adding your BEP vendors or veteran-owned businesses, anything that you're going to be adding here in response to a goal. While these vendors are listed in the BidBuy system and we have an interface, when you are submitting these vendors, you still want to go out and do all the required due diligence on your part. So you will still go out to the state opportunities website to confirm all the information about the vendor that you are submitting. When you are submitting, a BEP vendor that's going to participate on your contract, you're verifying, that their BEP certification is current and active, all that kind of information. But so the fact that these BEP vendors do exist within BidBuy, it is there to allow you to be able to go ahead and add them. But in all cases, just as you do now, you'll continue to, establish that relationship with that BEP vendor. The BEP vendor is going to know that you're submitting them as part of the quote. You're going to be verifying their certification categories and doing everything that you do currently when you're adding them here. So make sure that you do that.
And then here's where you can add their estimated dollar amount. We'll say they're going to do save and continue. You can look. Now you can see up here where it says the validation warnings. Now this might be a good time to talk about the red errors versus the yellow errors. Now the red errors, those are hard stops. They will not allow you to submit a bid. Some of these, the yellow warnings are saying, hey, look, there's no category BEP certified for this vendor. This vendor is not certified for the NIGP item. Your quote has not been submitted. Now, I still will be able to submit this, but this is there to help you say, hey, look, this vendor is not qualified to go towards this BEP goal. And we have a question here. Regarding the no bid, that means that for all the notifications that admin receive, if he does not want to submit a bid, he has to answer to all notifications, either bidding or not. No, you wouldn't need, if you did not want to, the no bid is just a specific functionality that is there to say, I acknowledge it, I am a vendor that is out here, but I'm not bidding on this. So it's certainly an optional thing. You wouldn't have to click no bid and submit on everything. If you went out and looked at a formal quote or saw a bid that you just didn't want to respond, you certainly just don't need to respond. If the vendor did select a BEP at that point, would the BEP vendor receive a notification? No, that would not happen at this point. You would, like Lori said, you would still need to reach out and do all the due diligence that you normally do now with that BEP vendor.
And that guidance really applies to everything that's occurring within BidBuy. So BidBuy, the best way to think about BidBuy, it is that electronic method of being able to convey all of your information to the state. And it's a central repository for all your procurement activity, but all of your due diligence that you've always had throughout the procurement process remains. The system itself is not going to, make decisions, make determinations. You're still required to make all of those determinations yourself. Okay, so we added our vendors here, or our subcontractors if needed. Here's that notes tab. Once again, this is a useful option for you to make notes to yourself. This is all the information you put here is not viewable by the agency. You can go back in and delete. If I wanted to make a quick note of myself, just to show you what it looks like here, it shows the date that I made the note, or I can go back and just delete it at any point. But that is totally just for you and an internal thing for your company. Moving along, we have our terms and conditions. Here's where we see, or you need to accept the terms and conditions. I see that this is a red error here, so I'm going to have to say, yes, I accept. No, I do not accept. Or yes, with exceptions. So it's important to point out here that if you click no or yes with exceptions, there is a possibility that you, as a vendor, could be deemed non-responsive because accepting the terms and conditions is a part of being responsive as a vendor. I just wanted to point out the importance of that. And at this one, it also shows the attachments that you can go, it constitutes all the attachments for the bid, which may have supplemental terms and conditions, so you can go in here and see those. So I'm going to accept the terms and conditions, and I'm moving right along. So here's where attachments where you would add your Forms B if you're in the Illinois Procurement Gateway, your Forms A if you're not in the Illinois Procurement Gateway, any certifications, all the information that you normally would send in with your paper bid will all be here. Your BEP utilization plan, for instance, would go here. Your contract, your certifications. It will be different for each bid, but this is where you'll attach all that important information there. So we're going to go open up the IFB template here. So while Dave's doing that, just a couple of words. In many cases, if not most cases, you will, in addition to submitting all your information electronically within BidBuy, your pricing, various answers to questions, in many cases you will also be completing your IFB template if it is attached. And so there is a new updated version of the IFB template, and Dave is going to show you that.
And so there will be more specific training regarding the templates, but we just want to get your eyes on the newest one. You can see here where there are links to go out to all your different BEP utilization plan, the letters of intent, all this information that will be attached in the attachments. But you can see all the instructions here that are going to go through all your, this all looks familiar probably to you, but this would all be filling with the contact for the IFB, would provide all the information that you would need the same way that you would do it now. Here's a good example of what could be added in the attachment tabs: the offer, the contract, redacted copy, exceptions, references if applicable, certifications, Forms A, Forms B, letter of intent, the BEP, et cetera.
And you'll notice there, if we can go back there, you'll see there's a little BB icon there, and that's really the main difference, is new instructions that have been added to the templates specific to your response in BidBuy. And so what you'll see in this particular one is the instruction here that says, if the state allows electronic quotes, the bidder may submit via BidBuy the following forms and others by uploading in the attachments tab. So what that is saying is that while you're going through and you're responding electronically, you will have requirements then to go through and add supplemental attachments, including, the IFB template itself and then the various documents. And those, back to the signature, you will actually physically sign that after you complete these documents completely and in their entirety. After you verify all the information that you've added to the documents, the same signature that we've always looked for on these documents will still be required when you're submitting these documents to the state electronically.
Okay, thank you, Lori. Let's see. If doing multiple offers, how would a vendor send multiple offers? Once we get into, at the end of this, submitting this quote, you'll see that there will be an option to create another quote. So we'll get to that maybe at the end, but you'll see how that works. What happens if they do?
If they do not do their due diligence.
Oh, is there a safeguard to be sure that someone is doing their due diligence to work with BEP vendors?
Yeah, absolutely. So but when any offer is submitted to the state and there is an inclusion of the BEP goals, there is a review by the state of that BEP participation, verification of the requirements. So absolutely, vendors are required, and that is verified through the process of determining if you are a responsive and responsible offerer or bidder.
Can we go back to submitting confidential information? So in terms of regarding who would be able to see information, only admin or the seller who submits the bid, example financial statements for a private company. So that's a great question. And that's within our, when we're adding attachments. Let's go ahead and do that. So we'll show you how we're going to add our, let's say financial disclosures. I'm going to add a file. And you will be able to mark it confidential. So let's see. We're going to add this file. You can see right here where I'm going to mark it confidential and save and exit. And so at this point, you can see what it is, all of your different attachments. You can see that it's marked confidential. So only so it will not display the document publicly. Only the state would be able to see it. At any point, shows when I did it. At any point, I can go in and delete that as well.
Yeah, and another couple of words about confidential documents. So oftentimes the state receives very complex information from our vendors, and you still have the opportunity to attach redacted copies. So the state often will receive the FOIA or the Freedom of Information Act requests for documents. And so if you are a vendor who often submits a redacted copy, when you go to upload, whatever document it is, let's say, your response to the state, and you also want to provide a redacted copy, then send us that redacted copy, attach it electronically here, put the word redacted copy in the file name so we know which ones are redacted, and we can ensure then when we receive a FOIA request, we have that redacted copy available to us. But any, Freedom of Information Act requests that we do receive will go through our standard legal review process before any documents are provided. But yes, absolutely, clicking the confidential box is also the other consideration for confidential information.
Okay, so we're going to fast forward. You have gone through your IFB here. You've filled out all the necessary information that is needed, and we've attached it into our attachments here. We've added all our required information that we need, Forms A or Forms B, depending on if you're in the IPG, financial disclosures, any other documents that are required. Then we'll go moving on to summary. At this point, I'm going to review all the information one time. I want to go through all of the information, make sure it's all correct. You can see that you'll see your subcontractors here, if that's applicable, the ones that you added. You see your questions that were required. Yes, I've added everything I needed. You'll be able to see all your attachments that are here. You'll see your price, everything, all your pertinent information that's there. I want to submit my quote, and it's going to ask me one more time, are you sure you want to submit this quote? I do want to. Okay. Now at this point, you could go down to the bottom, and at any point before the bid opening date, which would be the required, like the deadline at this point, you could withdraw the quote. I get back in the next day, say, no, I want to withdraw this quote. You are able to withdraw the quote. And just to make a quick note there, once that's withdrawn, you can see in your quotes, you can see which, up here in your header tab here, you can see that anything that was withdrawn, just a reminder from our previous seller training, you can always go into your quotes, you can see which ones you're working on but haven't been submitted yet, which quotes you submitted, which quotes were withdrawn, and your formal quotes unsubmitted. So that's good functionality there. I'm going to go back and reopen the quote because I changed my mind again, and I do want to submit it. So we're going to submit. Are you sure you want to submit this quote? I want to double check everything, make sure all my pricing information is correct. I have everything attached that I need to. I'm going to, yes. Now up here, like we said, I added a vendor that isn't technically BEP certified. It's just giving me a warning here, but it did not keep me from submitting the bid. It's just a helpful warning there, letting me know that that's the case. Okay, up at this point, you see status submitted. Okay, so this has been submitted. I would receive a confirmation email that I showed you earlier saying that it's been submitted, so you can kind of see two different areas, confirmation that the state has received it. I have a question here. If we have many sellers, will they see the confidential or only the admin?
I believe it's anyone who has access to this vendor account will see those notes. It is something that I want to confirm, but I would err on the side that when you're adding information as a seller for your vendor, that other sellers within your account for your company will be able to see your notes.
Okay, so this point has been submitted. Like I said, you'll receive this confirmation email that it's been submitted. If you receive this email, but you have submitted it, the quote by paper, then what that means is that the state has entered the quote in BidBuy on your behalf at that point, and it's been in the system. So you'll still receive the confirmation email either way. And there you go, you put in a formal quote. Here's the contact information for the vendor help desk. This is important confirmation or information for you for the email as well as the phone number. The vendor help desk team is fantastic, and they know the system inside and out, so they would certainly be able to help you. As well as I want to go out and show you the pathway to procurement site. There's a lot of good vendor manuals and how-to videos here, and there's a link here as well. You can also, at any point, just Google pathway to procurement Illinois. I believe that's the first one that comes up. well, while I'm waiting for that link, we'll just go up it. I'll show you how you do that. There it is. That's the first one, Pathway to Procurement. We touched on this website with previous trainings, but I think it's so important and there's such good information out here that we want to touch on it again. We have our training here. You can always go and see what training is going to be offered. If we go to, let's see, we go to the, here's some general information on how to do business with the state, BidBuy. Now here's a great page. There's 3 videos here. You can go back in terms of how to register in BidBuy, how to register if you're an IPG. This one talks about the seller administrator role, as well as these manuals. They'll be very, very beneficial. So if you have questions, you can always go directly out to these seller manual or the seller administrator manual and get some questions answered that way, or you can always phone the help desk or send them an email.
And this is where we'll also be posting out recordings of the training sessions that we're doing. So you get new staff, you want to train new staff, and we have provided a resource where they can come and sit through some of our recording sessions. So
just to show you what I just did there. So the main Pathway to Procurement site down here, BidBuy, we have this training series. So some of you that went through the previous sessions, the webinar recording and the PowerPoint slides are out there now. So we highly encourage you to go out and take a look at those again so you're all comfortable with the system, as well as upcoming sessions that we'll be doing. So for instance, the next session, now that we're finishing up on session 3, on Thursday, we're going to talk about, okay, so I did put in an award, or I did put in a bid, and I am going to be awarded. What will we do there? So we'll talk about the bid opening, the award, the purchase order, and that process. And this will be Thursday at 1 o'clock. And I believe Lori spoke about this earlier, but we have these 6 sessions coming up, and then we're going to start them all over again. So of course we have the recordings that will be posted, but if you would like to go through these webinars again, we're going to be going through these over the next several months, just to make sure everyone is comfortable with the system. So you may want to share those with the rest of your company, and just want to make sure that this is a resource out there for you, and you can always go back and look at all this information that's out here. There's a lot of information, and the team has done a great job of putting that out there for everyone to see. So with that said, do we have any other questions? I know there's a lot of information thrown at you. It's a new system, but once you go through it a few times, you'll get comfortable with it, and before you know it, you'll be a BidBuy master. So we'll leave the line open for a few minutes for questions. Other than that, we'll see you on Thursday afternoon, hopefully, and we'll talk about purchase orders and awards. Looks like we have a couple questions here. When site visits are mandatory, how would that be reflected in BidBuy?
So a couple of different things. If there is a pre-bid conference, that pre-bid conference information is listed right in BidBuy. You'll see the date, the time. There could be a question added by the agency saying, please confirm, that you attended the pre-bid conference. But if it is a pre-bid conference, there's going to be a sign-in sheet that they're going to verify that you did attend, if it is mandatory. But that's actually going to be data within the BidBuy system that you would see.
Okay. We have another question. I feel like I'm missing purchase orders out there. Will I always be emailed first regarding them being available to me? Yes, you will certainly be emailed each time, but you could also go out and log into your system at any time and log into your account and see any purchase orders, any bids, any quotes. The functionality within BidBuy really allows you to get in and see everything that is pertinent to your company. So the answer is yes.
And a couple more words on that topic. So you will get those email notifications based on the NIGP codes you select. This was something that we covered in a previous session about setting up and registering and creating your account. But when you do create an account in BidBuy, just like IPG and IPB and the other places that you've had registrations, it's very NIGP code dependent. So look at BidBuy, see if you have the correct NIGP code selected, and that could make the difference for you.
Okay, thanks. The NIGP codes are pulled from IPG or the BEP certificate, and how can we add more NIGP codes to our BEP certification? So two things there. Yes, the NIGP codes are pulled from the IPG system into the BidBuy. And we did touch on this with the seller administrator role, but it's important enough, let's reiterate it. The NIGP codes that you have selected in BidBuy, you can add more within the BidBuy system. So it is important that you go out to your BidBuy account and make sure that you have all the NIGP codes listed that you would want. But they are pulled from the IPG as well.
And let me just add a little thing there. So I think this question also includes how can we add more NIGP codes to our BEP certification? So if you do want to make an adjustment to your BEP certification, that would not be related to BidBuy. That is communication that you have directly with BEP. The codes that you are selecting when you go in and register at BidBuy are all voluntary codes. So they're your self-selected codes. Official changes to your BEP codes you would do through the BEP group.
Okay, thank you. And where can you obtain the plans for the scope of work to make an accurate quote? So any of that important information will be within the formal quote. All that information will be in the attachments tab, so you would be able to make your accurate quote.
Well, that looks like all the questions that we have this morning. Again, thank you to everyone for attending, and we hope to see you back at our other sessions. And, again, the vendor help desk, either through email or the telephone number, great resource. The training manuals that are out there and available are more detailed than we can present in, a recorded webinar, so make use of those. All of those will continue to be available to you. So that ends our session today, and we will see you again in the future. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.